Okay, hello everyone. Hope everyone can hear me okay, see me okay. Um, I'll move this out of the way here. And I have a chat room here open on the side, so I'll try to get to questions here as we go. We got a good amount of things to cover here today. And we have a big group, about 55 here. So without further ado, let's talk QA. Let's talk software development lifecycle. So today we'll cover the software development lifecycle. We'll also talk a little bit about Jira, the epics, the stories, and tasks. And we'll talk about the bug lifecycle and the workflow. So most of this is going to be the basics. This is only your lesson 3. You still have a lot of lessons to go and a lot of information to cover. So I might not be answering all of the questions simply because you might not need to know a lot of information right now. You'll have a lot of hands-on later on, but I'll want to make sure I cover the basics and try to explain it to you in basic terms. Some of these concepts can be complicated. We're going to take a break in about an hour or so for about 10 minutes. And before that, in between slides, I'll try to cover some questions if you have any. So feel free to ask questions in the chat. I'm going to be checking it here once in a while as we go through all the slides. All right, so let's talk about how software is made and how the software development process happens. On the picture here, you guys can see that there's a couple who's putting together, maybe a table or something along the lines of, it looks like a table to me. So let's talk about the software development lifecycle in more of like an everyday item. And for example, let's take the a table that maybe a computer table. I like to give an example of a table. I like one of those that go up and down, like a stand-up desk. And in a software development lifecycle, and just like in anything, in any planning of let's say talk about the computer desk, we need to plan, we need to design, develop, we want to test, we want to deploy, and want to maintain. So, for example, in the first stage, the planning stage, when you're designing, a table, you have some kind of an idea or a solution or a problem that you're trying to solve, right? So, for example, you want to build a table, and that has a feature where you can have it as a sitting desk or a stand-up desk, right? So you're going to plan that out. You're going to try to figure out where you want to build this desk, how this desk is going to look, who the customers for this desk is going to be, kind of the plan, the price point, who you target customer is, right? So this is the first stage. You're trying to gather idea. You're trying to plan out, what this desk is going to be, who you're going to target, where it's going to be built, what material is going to be used, and you basically the beginning of let's say a company, right? After that, the second stage is going to be the design. In the design stage, you want to figure out what the desk is going to look like, what it's going to be made out of, the size of it, the shape of it, how fast it's going to be moving up and down, how, what material is going to be used. It's going to be a metal desk, it's going to be a plastic, wooden. So that's going to be your second stage, which is the design stage. The third stage is the develop stage, where you're actually going to build it, right? So you find a factory maybe in China, and then you start building it. You're developing it, right? You're putting it together using whatever material you decided in the design stage or in the planning stage that you're going to be building it with. The next stage is the testing stage. You want to make sure that it's working. You want to make sure that the mechanism that makes the table go up and down works. You want to make sure that it's sturdy, that it doesn't doesn't wobble. It holds the weight that you want it to hold, like whether that's going to be, a computer or maybe a monitor, as well as maybe you want to test it. You want to stand up on it, make sure it's holding a lot of weight. It doesn't just break down. So you want to test it, and you want to make sure that it's working exactly the way you want it, that the color of the table is the way you originally wanted it to be. It's in the shape that you want it to be. It doesn't, well, it's not unbalanced or in it's leveled, right? After that, you have the deploy stage where you basically ship it, right? The logistics. You want to, where do you want to ship it to? How you going to deliver it to your customer? Do you have it sold on Amazon? Is it going to be shipped from a warehouse within the US, or it's going to be directly shipped from, from China, whatever it may be? And then you have the maintenance stage. The maintenance stage is once the customer gets the table, how are you going to support your customer, right? If sometimes the table might come in, there may be a failure rate of like 1 out of 10, might not have a few screws that they're not able to put together. Maybe the mechanism breaks. How are you helping your customer? Do they need to be able to ship this table back to you, or do you ship them the replacement parts? You want to be able to make sure you're supporting your customer, you get good reviews so that you can sell more tables, right? So, and these are the 6 stages of, of building and delivering the table. And it's the same thing for the software, right? You have the planning, the design, the develop, the test, deploy, and the maintenance stage. So I'm going to go over each of these stages in detail. I'm going to kind of explain to you how the software development works in each of these stages, and I'll try to give you an example of how what does a QA does in each of these stages. Also, before going any further, just wanted to introduce myself, which I should have done earlier, but I'll do that now. My name is Michael. I am been a QA for about 4 years now. I'm a manual QA. I work for a company called Sure. We basically build insurance product for various different customers. Before that, I worked for a company called Indeed. You might have heard of them. It's Indeed, a job searching site where I was basically testing mobile applications. So every time you use the mobile application on Indeed, I was one of the QAs. So yeah, basically I been only doing manual QA for maybe 4.5 years now, and I love it, and I'm going to be sticking with that for a little bit for sure. Okay, so let's go over and talk about each of these stages in more detail. So the first stage is the planning stage, okay? So this is the first phase in the software development process. It identifies necessities for new software to achieve business objectives. The purpose of the step is to find out the scope of the problem and determine the solution. So the idea here is we want to be able to figure out what we need to solve a problem or what the business requirement is, right? Typically in this stage, the product manager, somebody who's building the product for a customer, starts gathering all the data, all of the documentation, right? They're trying to figure out how much resources is needed. So for example, let's say, you work for a company, they have a product manager, and the customer comes to, to your company. Typically, this customer will be talking to a product manager and says, okay, well, I'm trying to build, I need a website, right? I'm a restaurant and I want a website that will show my customers maybe a menu, location of our restaurant, maybe some information about us, how to get in touch with us, maybe talk about our history of the restaurant, so on and so forth. And so the product manager will basically gather all of this information. They will write it out into a document, typically called like a business development, a product document. It's not important at the moment, but basically they will put together this document, and in there they will list everything in detail, and they will also try to figure out how much resources needed, how long it will take to build this. They will try to project schedule, right? They'll try to schedule out if it will take a month, if it will take a couple of weeks, or maybe a year to build this website. how much it would cost, right? How many developers there would need to be, how many QAs would need to be on there, and how it would be basically delivered. You know, the requirements that are needed. What does the customer essentially want? At this stage, as a QA, you don't really do anything. You're not, typically most of the time you're not involved, unless this is an ongoing project. Maybe, you know, this is like a part of building a feature up from a bigger, maybe a bigger website. You know, there's maybe, let's say you're working on the site that already has a lot of pages and they want to add an additional page. The product manager might involve you just to kind of ask you a question. Well, what do you think about, how long do you think it will take you to test this small new page? But for the most part, you know, 95% of the time, you're not involved in the planning stage. This is all the product manager's portion, and they are putting together and gathering data, and they're trying to write down the documentation that eventually you will be reading and you will be using to test based upon using that documentation. All right, makes sense so far? Just want to check in with you guys. See if you have any questions, feel free to drop a note. Okay, perfect. So far, so good. All right, let's go to the next stage. So the next stage is the design stage. So once the requirements are understood, the software architects and developers can begin to design the software. The design process uses established patterns for application architecture and software development. System design helps in specifying approaches to development and defining overall system architecture. The system design specifications serve as input for next phase of the cycle. In this phase, QA comes up with test strategy, where they mention what to test and how to test. All right, so there's a lot of words, but essentially, the design stage is, let's, for example, take the same or a customer who wants to get a website for their restaurant. And the product manager gathered this document, and this product manager will go to the design team and they will say, okay, well, I have a customer, he wants this website. What do you think, you know, can you kind of draw out the frames? And the designer will basically put together some ideas, right? Maybe make a logo, figure out what colors they want to use, how the website is going to be looking like, where the menus are going to go, you know, if they want to have a map, where the map is going to go on the website. So the design part of it is typically, most of the time, is going to be like a UX UI designer who's strategizing on, you know, what the website is going to have, what kind of a feel and look it's going to have. If it's an application, mobile application, they'll start putting together a wireframe of like how the application is going to look like. Again, what colors it's going to use, where the buttons are going to go, you know, what's going to happen if you press, like, let's say, a button on one side, where it's going to take the customer, you know, kind of a mind map of navigation. For the developers on this stage, they figure out, okay, what language of software we're going to use to build this, right? They figure out the architecture. They try to figure out, okay, do we need to write this in Java? Do we need to write this in maybe JavaScript or, you know, Python, whatever it may be? The developers figure out how they're going to put it all together. For the QA at this point, usually in my company, when my product manager, you know, has this document put together, he would share it with me, and I would read it, and I would start thinking about the test strategy. I would try to think about how I would test this website. You know, if it's a website, I would try to strategize and write out, okay, well, does it have like a login page? How would I test this login page, right? Does it have, what pages will it have? It has the contact us page, it has the about us page, and I'll try to put together some kind of idea, maybe even start writing, you know, a first test cases of how I'm going to test each of the pages. You know, if there is a contact us page, for example, and there's a phone number, you know, if I'm on my phone and I press the phone number, is it going to make a call? So little things like that, I want to start keeping in mind as I read through the document, right? And if I can already start putting together some documentation of how I'm going to test it once I get this website in my hands and I can start playing around this and pressing buttons and making sure everything works. All right, does that kind of make sense so far? All right, perfect. We're still good. Not too complex. Perfect. All right, so once the design stage is done, again, it's typically done by, most of the work is usually done by the design team. But again, there could be some that as a QA, you would be doing a little bit of documentation at this point. The next stage is the develop stage. All right, so this phase involves the actual coding, programming of the software. After the requirements and design activity is completed, the next phase of the software development lifecycle is the implementation or the development of the software. So again, this is where the developers are going to start coding, the design of the website with the requirements from the customer for how they want it. Developers also write unit tests for each component to test the new code that they have written, review each other's code, create builds, and deploy software to an environment. The cycle of development is repeated until the requirements are met. This portion basically says that, so let's say there's a couple of developers. Usually there's 2, maybe 3 developers building a website, and they review each other's code. Just kind of helps them keep the code clean and maybe not introduce too many bugs. A lot of the time they would write code and then they will have another developer read that code and just kind of check for errors and maybe mistakes and things like that. Sometimes they find bugs within their code and they will report it and fix it themselves. A lot of the time as a QA, you're not really involved in developers process. However, as a QA, you're still, so for me at this stage, most of the time I'm continue writing test cases. I'm writing test strategy and how I'm going to be testing. If the development already started, then a lot of the planning and little things have already been worked out. So there is a better understanding of how the software is going to look like or how the website is going to be looking like. So I can write better test cases, more with better understanding of what the end goal is here. There may be cases where you already have your hands on some of the very early stages of the software to play around with that will help you write test cases, but it's not, but a lot of the time you might not, because developers usually, they want to have their whole unit put together before they move it over to the QA to start testing. So again, as a QA at this stage, you're not testing anything yet. You're going to be writing test cases, mostly documentation that will help you test once you do get it to the QA stage, right? Once you do get it to the testing stage, you have a lot of things written out and you can just already basically follow what you've wrote out and what you've planned for. All right, I see a couple of questions here. Is this the stage where where they do unit and integration testing? They do unit testing, but this is between within the developers themselves. But no, there's not necessarily any testing going on. This is only the building cycle right now. They're just building the software. So there's not going to be a lot of, I would say there's no testing happening here just yet. Does a project manager always provide documentation for project for their QA testers? Yes. Well, in my experience, there's always documentation for a project. Otherwise, you don't really know what you're QAing. You don't know what the requirements are, what the expectations are. So if there is not documentation, you want to ask for it. Typically, if I ever receive anything that I need to QA, I will 100% ask for, okay, well, what am I expecting? What is the expected results? What are the testing requirements here? Because you don't know if it's, when you're testing and you see a bug, you don't know if it's a bug or if it's actually expected like that, unless you read the document and says, well, this is how it should be. This is where QA goes by. You have documentation. Is this considered white box testing? I'm not sure I understand the question. There's no testing done yet. The development is only the where the software is just being built. So the website is just literally being coded, and you might not even see what's being done. So as a QA, you don't really even touch this part. Okay. So let's go to the next slide. This is the testing slide. This is where, as a QA, you're going to be spending most of your time. This is a little unrelated. Is unit testing white box testing or black box testing? Just wanted to clear. Unit testing can be both, and it can also be gray box testing. QA keeps find testing strategy. That's it. Right, correct. So testing. During testing, QA starts to test the software against the requirements, just like you get from the product manager. Once a defect is found, testers will inform the developers who will fix and create new version of the software, which needs to be verified again. This cycle is repeated until all the requirements have been tested and all the defects have been fixed and the software is ready to be shipped. So very simple. Developers will pass on the website to you. This is, let's say this was the website for the restaurant, and they will tell you, okay, you can go ahead and start testing, find as many bugs as you can. And that's basically your job. Now, the good news is that because in the previous two steps, you've been writing test cases, you already know exactly what you're going to be testing and how you're going to be testing it. All you're doing is you're just following the steps that you wrote out for yourself in the previous two stages. So it's going to be much faster for you to go through testing. However, while testing, you might encounter some new ideas of what you want to include in your testing. So you can write some more test cases, some more ideas, right? But this is where you're going to be starting to see bugs, right, or defects. Defects and bugs are basically reported. So you will write a bug report, which we'll go over in a little bit, a few slides over. You will give that back to the developer. Developer will fix this bug, will give it back to you. You verify it by trying it again and seeing if it's fixed. If it's fixed, great, you move on to the next stage. Or if it's not fixed, you give it back to the developer. They try to fix it again. Then they give it back to you and you see if they actually fixed it or not. And this cycle repeats until the software is where you want it to be and it matches the documentation that was written in the first stage. Okay, you provide the sign-off and you verify that whatever the developers put together matches the requirements, matches the documentation that was signed off by the product manager who signed this off by the customer. So essentially that's what you're doing. Sanity testing, is that called sanity testing? Sanity testing is just simply one of the strategies that you'll go over in later lessons. Once the bug is fixed and you verify it, that means you verified and it's a fixed bug. Those are two different things, and those will be, the sanity testing will be explained in later lessons actually. Okay, so again, I just want to emphasize the idea once you get to this stage, right? You have the planning stage where the product managers plan, write everything out. Design stage where the website is drawn out. Development is when a website is built, and then the testing is when you actually get it in your hands and you start testing. This is majority of the time you will be doing all of your work as a QA in the testing stage. You're going to be testing the website, and you want to put yourself in a customer's shoes and look at whatever you're testing as a customer. How would I like it as a customer? Would I be, is the website too slow? Is it moving too slow? Are the colors off? Are the buttons, you click on all the buttons, are all the buttons working? So that's basically the idea. Based on your experience, what are the protocols when it comes to communicating bugs to developers? I'll actually go over that. It's all based on Jira and tickets, moving back and forth, and I'll actually explain that a little bit. Planning step is done by the product manager. Correct, yes, the planning step is done by the product manager. The product manager plans out and writes out the requirements and then moves it over to the design team. All right. So the deployment. So once the product is tested, once you basically did your testing in here and ready to be deployed, it released normally formally in appropriate markets. Sometimes product deployment happens in stages as per business strategy of their organization. The product may first be released in a limited segments and tested in real business environment. As soon as the product is available to the customers, QA executes sanity tests while users do the beta testing. If any changes are required or if any bugs are caught, then they will be reported to the engineering team. So essentially, the deployment part of it, different companies do it in different ways. So for example, in my company, when I've tested the product and I okay it, you know, our product can be released nationwide. However, we would only maybe ship it out to, let's say, one of the states, right? Or maybe one of the cities. This way, it will only impact a small amount of users. So if there's any bugs that, you know, me as a tester didn't catch, and it's possible I can't catch all the bugs, you know, those will show up because there's going to be, let's say, you know, 1,000 users who are going to be using the software. So 1,000 users might have different variations of how they use the site, and they might catch a bug or two, right? And then we'll fix this bug. And when we see for, you know, within, let's say, a month of using it in one city, we see, okay, we don't see any more bugs. Looks like we can open it up to more users. Well, we'll then release it to the full state. And then we'll have the state, and, you know, now you have a few million users, maybe 10 million users using the software, to see if there's any more bugs that we didn't catch. Maybe there's bugs that are related to stress, where there's too many users that are using the site and it might slow it down and crash the site, and if and see how that's acting out, how it's being used. If we're seeing that there are bugs, we will go back, we will fix it, you know, and then we'll release it to nationwide. Well, everyone in US get to use, you know, the site that we want to do. So that's the deployment process. Again, some use it based on, you know, geography. Some maybe use it based on, you know, some other way, depending on how they want to, you know, kind of send out and deploy this. Sometimes not all customers, you know, not all companies have the ability. Sometimes, you know, a company might be able to just release it to their own employees, maybe a company of 1,000 people, and they will ask everyone in the company, hey, can you test the software before we can release it to production? So there's different strategies, but in deployment stage, this is where, you know, you want to be able to deploy it, and maybe deploy it gradually to make sure that you can catch the bugs that didn't get caught during testing. All right, I see some bugs. I'll try to answer some tickets, some questions. I'll try to answer those. Is this the same as beta version, right? It could be. I mean, we probably seen, like, I don't know, I think Apple might have like a beta version that you can use. They're like, let's say they release the beta version of the new OS. They do that once in a while. To some extent, yes. They release the beta version to have some users test the software before they, you know, release the stable version. A lot of the times they do that because they want their customers to test their apps that they're building with the new version of the OS to make sure that it's compatible. That's one of the reasons they do that. But also as a customer, you can also download this beta version to play around with it. It's very unstable. It could crash, it could have bugs, it could be a lot of bugs. But as a, you know, for Apple, they get to see what bugs they're, you know, it's catching, and they may be able to address them much faster because they have a lot more users that are using, you know, the software. So yeah, to some extent, but not everyone does it this way. It's just one of the strategies. So by the way, just want to remind you that this presentation is being recorded. So once we're done with it, you will get a link with a copy of this presentation, and you can watch it. And again, if you missed anything, if you joined later, you can always go back and rewatch it. Okay, so that's the deployment stage, and let's go over the maintenance stage. So this is kind of the last stage. However, it might necessarily be the last. Some companies have more than 6 stages, but usually it's 6. So the maintenance phase of the software development lifecycle occurs after the production is in full operation. Maintenance of the software can include software upgrades, repairs, and fixes of the software if it breaks. So the maintenance stage is basically once the the product is already delivered and is being used by many customers, there's still going to be bugs, there's still going to be issues, and one of the ways that the company monitors to see how the software is doing is there's product analysts that monitor customers' feedback. So customers might write reviews based on the application. For example, in the App Store, you can rate the software. A lot of the times, customers write any kind of bugs that they run into, the reason they're not happy with the application. So product analysts will gather that data, and they might create some bug tickets out of that, and maybe they would build new features based on that feedback, or maybe they'll write out some new ideas of how they want to fix this in later releases. Also, engineers monitor software errors. Engineers have different tools and different applications that they use that gives them data and stats on how the software is doing. If it has a lot of crashes, if there's certain bugs and errors that are showing up, sometimes even without the user knowing that there was a bug. And they also see which bugs show up more often. If the application is running slow, they can also monitor that and create plans for later releases and later upgrades and features when they release updates. So as a QA, you want to identify bugs that weren't caught during testing. So if you didn't catch a bug and it went over and something happened in production and there's a bug in production, it's not necessarily your fault, but it's a really good opportunity for write test cases for the future releases, right? It gives you an idea of like, oh, well, why didn't we catch this? Where did we miss this this bug? Or did we miss a test case that we didn't think of? Or did we not think of a certain scenario that this bug should have been caught? So it gives you a great learning experience. It gives you great opportunity to understand what you've missed, and you can write test cases based on those bugs that coming from production from your customers. And then in later releases, the new features, you can run this through that test that was that you missed maybe when it was caught in production. In maintenance, engineers fix new bugs and update software, and QA verifies the bugs. So basically, this is at this point you get feedback from your customers, and then you see how your software is doing. Okay, hope that makes sense. Let me see if I can answer some questions here. Can a product analyst role be a QA role? So a lot of the time, so in my company, for example, the product manager will also QA the product that they put a requirement in. They're also curious to see how the software is doing. And they can also catch bugs, and they will report bugs as well. My product manager, once it gets into QA, he's eager to see, okay, what did the developers build? He wants to play around with the software because the customer is going to ask him, hey, how are we doing? Are we on schedule? Are we behind schedule? How is the software doing? They might not be able to give them all of the information, but a product manager will be able to, oh yeah, play around. It's looking good so far. We scheduled to deliver it to you in a month. We're just catching a lot of bugs. We're fixing those, and we'll have it back to you. So product managers, a lot of the time they catch bugs too when they play around with it, and also they realize, oh, maybe they didn't write out the product specs correctly, and they also made mistakes too. In what part of the software development lifecycle the UAT phase falls under? Ooh, the UAT, I don't know if we want to go into the UAT phase. This may be beyond this lesson, but the UAT essentially, if your customer, it's when your customer gets the product and they get to test it. This is, I would say it's in the deployment stage, but I'm not going to go into too much detail on that. You'll learn about that in later lessons. Oh, there's a lot of questions. Give me 1 second. A stress test difficult to run when you're only one QA, or are you in a small group of QAs? If you want to run a negative test as well on over amount of users. So stress tests are, different companies have it in different ways. I mean, I am the only QA. I don't run stress tests. We have developers who build different, usually stress tests are done in their tools that do this for you. You don't necessarily try to build this out yourself. Some companies have QA team does it. Some companies have developer does it, depending on how the structure is done. But it's usually done by, by like a software. You don't do it yourself. When do we learn how to write test cases? I think in lesson 6, but I might be wrong about that. What is a bug? That's a great question. I will talk about that in the next slide. In your experience, do you have to explain the SLD at the job interview? Yes. You probably will be asked about, the software development life cycle. Employees want to make sure you understand how the development happens, because everyone is doing this, right? And they want to make sure that you understand where you're going to be as a QA and what you should be doing as a QA. So again, if the software you're building is in the, in planning stage, in design stage, and in a deployment and development stage as a QA, they want you to be able to start writing test cases. They want you to understand, oh, at this stage I write test cases and I will be testing this once it gets to the QA stage. So it's good to understand the stages and to understand as a QA where you will be in each of these stages. What if a bug occurs and you have little to no idea how it happened? Well, there's 2 ways. I mean, you definitely want to try to figure out how the bug happened, but if you don't, you can get help. You can get a developer on a call. You can get on Zoom and say, hey, I got this bug and I don't understand how I got it. I'm not quite sure how it got me here. The one thing you want to try to make sure is that you can reproduce it. You can kind of show it again. It's like, oh, you got to this bug, and the developer will ask, well, can you show me what happened? How did you get here? He'll ask you for the steps, and you can show him, say, okay, well, I pressed here, I pressed here, I pressed here, and this happened. And together you can figure out, and the developer will be like, oh, well, this is the reason it happened. So you always want to be able to be comfortable, getting in touch with the developers, the product managers, and kind of have that communication. Very important. Okay, so looks like we have a good amount of information that we covered. Let's take a quick break because next one I will explain what is a bug. So let's do a quick 5-minute break and we will get back and we'll continue on. I know this was a lot of information that we just covered, and let's come back here in the 5 minutes. Okay. Thank you, guys. All right. How's everyone doing? Oh, perfect. Good. I see already bug reports are happening in Slack and channel. Good job, guys. Uh, all right. Any questions so far? Everything is making sense. We have all the stages down. We're gonna pass the interview. Yes. Okay. Good. All right. Let's talk. Yes, indeed. All right. So let's keep going. And let's talk about what is a bug. So a bug is simply an error, flaw, failure in a program which causes it to behave incorrectly or unexpectedly. So essentially not as designed. Very simple. So next slide. Okay. So there could be many reasons for a bug. For which software contains bugs, but the root causes of the defects can normally be caused and classified into the following. So miscommunication or no communication. Basically, a lot of the time, you have a lot of parties involved, right? So the miscommunication can be between maybe a customer and the product manager, right? So when a product manager was putting together a document, he maybe misunderstood the customer and wrote one requirement, but the customer meant something else. Is it necessarily a bug? It might not be a bug, but it's not something that was originally wanted. There could be a miscommunication between a product manager and designer, right? So the product manager writes the document. Maybe the idea that he wrote out might not resonate with the designer or the developer, and they read it one way, so they build it in a different way, and it doesn't match what's in a document. So there could also be, so once a QA gets the product, they start testing it based on what's in the document, and it's not matching, right? So you will ask a question, well, what happened? And a developer can say, oh, actually, I read it, I misread it, I misunderstood it, I didn't understand what was actually supposed to be here the way it was explained in a document, right? Or if there's no communication between a developer and a product manager, and developer might be trying to get in touch with the product manager and trying to say, well, I can't understand what this what's written in the document, maybe you can explain. And the product manager doesn't get back to the developer. He'll build it the way he thinks best, and it might not be the right way. So it's a defect. It's not what is supposed to be there. Software complexity. Software can be extremely complex, extremely difficult, right? There's huge websites. Like, let's, for example, take Amazon. It's a very big website, a lot of product, very complex. The ordering system, the refund system, a lot of things can go wrong. You have a lot of teams, a lot of development teams, a lot of QA teams working on different features at the same time. And some features might not work well with other features, and it creates bugs. When you have a very large software, there's a lot of room for errors and bugs. Changing requirements. Sometimes, even more often than not, the requirement could change when you're already halfway through the development, right? So sometimes it could be when you're in the middle of testing and you realize, okay, what you've built might not necessarily work very well. It might not be something that the customer, because you're a QA, you try to represent the customer, you can go back to the, to the product manager or to designer and say, well, look, I know you have this button, on top left corner, but if I'm using my iPhone, it's really hard for my finger to reach that high up. I think it would make sense to maybe move the button down to the right, for example, right? So that's a change in requirement. It might necessarily be coming from you. It could be when you're testing something, the product manager is like, oh, you know what, actually our customer just got to us came back to us and they said they want this page to be somewhere else in a different place, or they want the software to work a little bit different, and they start changing the requirements while you're testing the product, and that could create some bugs because it might affect some other place or some other part of software that you might have tested already. Software development tools change. We talked about a few slides over, for example, a developer has different software that they use to keep track of the software, see how it's doing maybe in the wild in production, and the software changes. And so, when the developer thinks he has the software set up one way and it's supposed to report to him how the software is doing if there's any bugs in production, but this software changed, and it's not reporting back to him. And the developer thinks everything is fine, but it actually isn't. It maybe already broke, but he wouldn't know. So that causes bugs. That could be one of the issues, that the data gathering might not be working very well. Poorly documented code. So when developers write code, they make notes within the code about what each piece of code does. And so sometimes they don't leave very good notes. They might not leave any notes. And for example, let's say a developer, wrote this piece of code that does something very important. He didn't leave any notes in the code of what it's doing, and he leaves for another company, and a new developer comes in, starts reading the code that was put together, and he doesn't understand it. So he might start changing it, he might remove it, and that could cause a lot of havoc. It could cause some bugs. It could cause, bugs that may be well hidden and, in a part of software that doesn't get used very well. You wouldn't know until something happens later on, maybe a year or two from now. So it could be anything really. Time constraints. This is when, product manager says to the customer, hey, we can have this done in a week. Well, it's impossible, right? I'm just going a little bit overboard here, but let's say in a month, but the development team took three weeks to build and you only have 1 week to test it. That might not be enough for you. You might be able to only catch a certain amount of bugs, and you didn't have enough time to test every single part of the software. Or all the software you think that's important to test. And so because of time constraints, you have to deliver something that may be more buggy than you would want it to. So that could also be a reason that there are bugs. How we know what kind of tests we need to do on a software or a product. So you will learn, actually, there's different tools, there's different software, there's different QA tools that you use to figure out what is the best way. And part of putting together a test plan is figuring out what tools you want to use to test, what strategy you want to put together to test, how you're going to test it, what things need to be tested, and how it's going to be prioritized. So you'll learn a lot of that. And also, this is just, part of being QA is figuring out your strategy on testing the software. Okay. Let's see if I can get example, an iPhone button on top right, and the user saying it's hard to push. When completing tests on the iPhone, if a button is too close to the top right, will QA just complete the report or suggest the button should be moved down to the bottom? So it depends. If the customer wants it there, a lot of the time, if it's in a requirement, that's the way it's going to be. But you as a QA, usually you represent the customer. So you can suggest and say, as a customer, I don't think it, it doesn't feel right that it's in this position. Maybe it would be better in a different one. But it's not up to your call. It's up to the call for the product manager. And if the product manager says, no, we did our testing, we did our A/B testing, we checked with our customer, we see that our users they like it more than it's in this position, then it's going to be there. It's up to the product, whatever's in the document, whatever the product manager or product manager decides, that's usually his call. As a QA, you can make suggestions, but it's not a bug. If if it's written that it needs to be in this particular place, it's usually going to stay there. So in the software development lifecycle stages where the bugs bug reports are created. The development stage, so in the development phase, bugs are reported mostly by developers. They are not something that you'll be seeing. They have their own kind of unit testing that they do, or when they build software, they write little test scripts that they run through their own code to make sure that the code they've written is working and it's passing. They don't really do enhanced QA as you do. They just kind of test certain parts that are important for them, certain features that are important for them, but they might not necessarily QA or test the whole, the whole site, for example. Most of the testing is done by the QA department, and most of the reports are, most of the bug reports are done by the QA department. So this is you as QA, you will be testing, whether that's a feature, and you'll be testing the feature, specific feature that's being developed, and then maybe how this feature is, touching other things and the whole site of its own, and how it's affecting the website overall, if it's the website or the application. And then in the maintenance, so after the software has been released, bugs are still being reported by employees and the end users, usually, the customers. Hopefully, there are not too many bugs coming in from your customers. Hopefully, you have caught all of the bugs or most of the bugs, but there are definitely going to be bugs that are in production. And so usually your customers are going to be reporting. Maybe they're sending like a Zendesk ticket, or send an email saying, hey, I tried to purchase a bicycle on your site, and it didn't work, or my purchase didn't go through. Hopefully you have caught that bug, but if you didn't, your customer will most likely send you an email saying that they weren't able to purchase something, as an example. Makes sense? How are we doing so far? We've been going through this pretty quick, and all right, looks like you guys are understanding. That's good. All right. So let's talk about how a bug report look like. And I'll go over each of the component. So essentially, when you're testing the the application of the website, you are and you find a bug. This is how a bug, like a simple basic bug report, looks like. So what you have here is a bug title. A bug title is probably one of the more important pieces. You want to kind of make sure you catch, you add like where and when the bug happened. You don't want to write out too much of a story, but you want to definitely be able to say, okay, this is what happened, this is where. This is very important for you to, first of all, this is the first part where whenever you're searching through, let's say, a software that keeps tracks of all the bugs, it's going to be the first thing that you see. So you want to be able to write it to where you yourself would be able to identify it. Pretty simple, right? So in example, attempting to access a website resulted in 404 errors. So you tried to go to a site and it failed. Simple, understandable, and something very sweet and short. So the bug ID is the number that the bug will get. Usually it's assigned by the software itself. You don't necessarily need to add that here. The status is the status of the bug. So in this scenario, it says new, which means this is a new bug. When the status changes and it moves through different stages between the developer or QA, this will change depending where it's at. So it gives you an idea of like, oh, this is being fixed, for example, or being developed, or being tested, whatever it may be. Priority. This is how important the bug is, how severe it is, how much impact it has on on the customer. So it's usually from P0 to P4. A P4 is very like not very trivial bug. It's something that not very important, but it's still a bug. For example, maybe an OK button is a wrong color. Instead of a blue, it may be yellow. It doesn't necessarily have your customer not being able to, maybe make a purchase or go to a link, but it's not the same color. It's not by design. It doesn't have a huge impact, but it's something that you want to fix. All the way to P0. P0, it's a blocker. It means that it's a critical error. And, my company, whenever we have a P0, everyone stops doing what they're doing and they go and they try to fix this bug, right? So this could be something like has an impact on the business, right? For example, if a customer is not able to, make a purchase on the site, right? They're got, a bicycle, let's say they're purchasing a bicycle, they got it to the shopping center, they put in their credit card and they hit pay and nothing happens, site crashes or something. That's a P0, you're losing business. You want to be able to fix this as soon as possible, make sure that your customer is able to place orders, is able to pay, so that you can get paid, right? So that's a P0, it's a blocker, very important. And that's how the priority is shifted. And there's a P2 and a P3. Usually those are, something that not necessarily a blocker, but like a P2 is important. It's crashing something maybe in the QA side, but it's not impacting the customer. So there's different stages that's determined usually by your team and your company. But more often than not, the P0s and the P4s are usually relatively the same from company to company. Assign to, this is the whoever is fixing maybe this report, this bug, or whoever, if it's a tester who's verifying this bug. Reported by, this is usually you as a QA, you the person who reported this. This way developers know if they need to reach out to you and ask you a question about this bug. Steps to reproduce. Now, this is a very important step to have it done correctly and to make sure that you have it written, very detailed. So you want to make sure you add here exactly how you got to the bug, step by step, as much detail as possible. If you need to add screenshots, if you need to add, video recording, whatever it may be, you want to make sure that you add all the details here so that the developer who gets this bug report is able to reproduce this bug as soon as possible in the easiest steps, right? They don't want to be trying to figure out, okay, what were you trying to tell them? They don't want to be sitting there, oh, did he mean this or did I? He needs to be able to say, okay, you go here, you click here, you should see this. When you see this, you want to go to the next stage, and you want to give them step by step. Not only does that help you when you start to verify, and maybe this bug you reported a couple of months ago and you get this back and it's like, wait, what did I write out? Sometimes you don't even remember this anymore, and so that you can yourself reproduce it. Or if you're not the tester, maybe you went on vacation, you want to be able to make sure that your coworker, somebody else who's a QA in your team, is able to follow these steps to reproduce that you wrote out, and they can also verify to make sure it's working once the developer fixed it. So very important, this step is extremely important to make sure you write this out in as much detail as possible. Expected result is actually what you expected to see. So, when I tried to go to this website, I expected the website to load. What you actually got is the basically when I went to the website, I got an error. Simple enough. Environmental details is what you use to see this bug, right? Were you on your phone when you tried to go to the website and you saw this bug, or was it on your laptop? And then if it's on your laptop, did you use Chrome? Did you use Safari? Was it Edge, Firefox, whatever it may be, so that the developer knows, okay, well, it looks like this bug was on Chrome because he may be using Safari and Safari doesn't have this bug. So pretty straightforward, but it's very important that you have this down. A lot of the time when you are applying for for a job, they will ask you, they might send you homework and they'll ask you to write test cases and bug reports based on the homework they send you, and they will grade you. They will grade you on how you wrote a bug report. A lot of the time, there's people who write messy bug reports, hard to follow. So those guys don't usually make it, but make sure you get this part correct. I imagine the steps to reproduce the bug being important to employees to know what you can explain how you got there precisely. Right, exactly. You want to be able to make sure that the developer is able to get to the bug in exact way how you found it, so they can reproduce it and they know exactly what to fix. And then when you verify the bug, you also follow the same exact step to make sure that that actual bug is fixed, right? What if you have multiple bugs from a step to step? Would you place them under the same bug ID? It depends, but most of the time I would write multiple bug reports. Even if it's related, a lot of the time, if it's, when you were, let's say, testing something and you found two bugs that are similar, you may be able to put it under the same bug report, but I try to write two bug reports. It's better to have a few more bug reports, even if they're similar, rather than one, because you want to make sure you cover everything. Okay. Any questions about the lesson so far? This makes sense. I know I'm going kind of quick. Okay, cool. No means no questions. All right, perfect. All right. Okay, awesome. How do we determine the priority? Again, it's up to, of course, it's up to you to determine the priority, but the idea is if it's impacting the business, if it's a blocker, if a customer is not able to get somewhere or get to the site, that's a P0, extremely important. You can't do any work because you're not able to get to the site, that's a P0, right? If it's a simple color not correct, or there's a misspelling, maybe, there may be a letter that's wrong, that's a P4. It's not an impact, it's not a huge problem. It doesn't look good to a company, but it's not like a customer can get to the site. Simple enough. Are there any cases where a tester forgets the steps, how they came across the bug? Well, yes, but at the same time, when you are reproducing, so the rule is basically when you find a bug, you want to run through and try to find it again, right? If you can't find it again, if it's like a fluke, you want to record it, but usually you should be able to, if there's a bug, you should be able to reproduce it, right? You're gonna come across it again. And so when you run it the second time, you try to okay, how did I get here? You then write down your steps, how you got there, and you use that. How many types of priorities exist? P0, P1, P2, P3, and P4. Usually a P3 and a P4 could be like a grammar issue. Sometimes, like in my company, we don't use P4, we use P3s. There is almost never a P4. P2s and P1s are the ones that are usually used most of the time. If I'm blocked in QA environment, it's a P1. If it's like an issue on one of the buttons, it may be a P2, but you'll learn about all those things later in lessons. You're gonna write bug reports, you're gonna play around with Jira, and you'll get a lot of detailed information about that. You'll have homework. You'll have one of our guys look over your homework and give you feedback on your reports and your test cases. Can you give an example of a critical bug? Yes, you're not able to get to a site, or you're not able to purchase something from one of your websites. When a new starting up company, would it be a QA task if the user can't create a login? No, that's a developer. developer will build a login page, but and it should be working. However, if you QA and you try to log in and you're not able to log in, that's a bug, and you would report that. All right. So let's talk about bug lifecycle. So a bug lifecycle is the journey of a defect from its identification to its closure. The life cycle varies from origination to from organization to organization, and is governed by the software testing process and the tracking tools being used. So, so basically, how when you find a bug, it's going to be a new bug report. And this new, think of it as this new stage. You just found a bug. So when you, in my company, when I find a bug, I imagine like maybe an inbox or like a box, right? And think of a bug report as like a sticky note. And so I write this document, a bug report, and I put like, okay, this is a new bug, and I'll put it into a to-do bucket. And the developer, you know, he goes through his day, he uses different, you know, page like to do tasks, and he'll get to a bug report that I submitted, and he will say, okay, well, looks like Michael here found a bug, and I'm going to assign it to myself. So the developer will assign it to himself, and he'll say, okay, I will be fixing this bug, and this bug will go into assign stage. And when it's in the assign stage, developer will start fixing this bug. He'll write new code, and he will, once he wrote new code that's supposed to fix the bug, he will move it to, you know, ready for QA box. And this box is where I look and see, okay, has my ticket been, you know, worked on, and has it been fixed? So at this point, it will be moved to me, and I will start verifying. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over step by step on these steps to make sure that I am able to get through, you know, whatever it may be, like going to a website, that I'm able to get to the website. If I'm still seeing a bug and it's not solved, it's not fixed, I'm going to go ahead and reopen it. I'm going to reopen it, and I'm going to move it back to the developer. And the developer, I'm going to write, listen, like, in a nice words, I know you tried fixing this, but it's not fixed, right? So can you try again and take a look at it and see that you can, you know, fix it? So the developer will try to solve it again, and whenever he thinks he solved it, he will move it back to me, and I'm going to go through the steps and verify it. And so when I verify it and I see, okay, if it's not fixed, I'll move it back to the developer and have him try to work on it again. However, if it's not, if it is fixed, I'm going to go ahead and close the ticket. Only at that point is the ticket closed. So as a QA, you govern when the ticket is closed, when you're satisfied with the fix. So the bug is open until you verify and make sure that as a QA, that it's the expectations is what you have written here, right? I am able to get to the page and it's loading. If it's still getting a 404 error, it's not fixed, and I'm going to assign it back to the developer. Right? Hope that makes sense. So these stages you want to have, because you might go on vacation and another QA person will be taking over, and they will get your bug report from a developer, and they will try to follow the steps that you wrote out, and they will want to verify to make sure that it's resolved. If it's not resolved, they will move it back to the developer. If it is resolved, they will go ahead and move it to close. And that's the life cycle of a bug. It's this ticket that gets moved around between you and a developer to make sure that it's closed, so that, you know, the feature can be continuously, you know, worked on. Hope that makes sense. An issue or a bug which does not allow QA engineers or developers to proceed further within their work. Yes, right. That's the P0 or P1. Usually a P0 in production, P1s are maybe in QA environment, but it may be it's usually a blocker for the QA. Does the bug lifecycle make sense? If a bug fix, yeah. Okay. Whoa, that was quick. One sec, let me see if I can read this. If the bug fix produces another bug, would I keep going back and forth with the developer or just report it as another bug? I would report it as another bug. So if the original bug is fixed, but when you were testing, you found a separate bug, maybe unrelated or something that's similar, but not that specific bug, I would report it as a new bug. What if a bug has the issue again? I mean, can it be reopened again after you close it? Usually you don't want to reopen a closed bug. If a bug is closed, you verified it, but let's say this bug shows up, a week or two or a month later, you want to create a new bug report. You want to leave the closed, usually the closed bugs stay closed. Don't want to open those up. Okay, how are we doing with time? So the good news, well, not necessarily good news, but there's no bug-free software. I want you guys to understand something is that you are helping the software. You are a part of fixing all the issues. I know a lot of the time QAs can feel like, oh, I keep reporting all these issues and I feel bad, and don't. You are making the software better. So computers and software that the application runs on will continue to change even while the code is frozen. The operating system continues to evolve with patches and fixes, as well as devices and drivers. This basically means that a lot of the time when the software is built, let's say you build an iOS application, and everything is working. Your application is flawless. It's working great. But a new year comes along, and Apple, releases the new operating system. Well, your software was working perfectly fine in the older operating system. To no fault of your company, because the operating system has changed, it could create new bugs and new issues. So there is no bug-free software, right? Aside from hardware and OS, there are also a number of middleware products underneath most significant apps that may also involve beyond control. Not sure why this is making so much noise here. Sorry. So what basically this is saying, for example, let's take get an idea of a software. Let's say you build an application, and it's a photo application. And a lot of the time companies use, third-party middleware, like AWS or Google, let's say Photos, right? It's very expensive for companies to have a lot of servers to keep storage. So they would, let's say, purchase the AWS or like Amazon storage services for their application. So your company would build an application to keep like images of the architecture that your company is building an architecture application, and you want your customers to be able to take pictures of this of a building, but this images are stored in AWS. So everything is working fine, but all of a sudden AWS decided to update their software or maybe change something or change their API, and all of a sudden your application doesn't have communication with Amazon, and you start having bugs and issues. And again, to no fault of your company's fault, to no fault of yours, the application will start having bugs because there is a middleware product that's involved, and there's a ton of different middleware out there that different companies use to build their software, make it better. So kind of keep that in mind. You don't necessarily, it's not your fault that there are bugs that show up even in production. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Jira and kind of how the development and organization of different bug reports kind of move around between stages. And Jira is a software is a project management tool that supports any methodology to be it Agile, Scrum, Kanban, and others. From Agile boards to reports, Jira helps plan, track, and manage all software development projects from single tool. So you can kind of see here that at my company, we use something very similar, not necessarily Jira. You will get Jira actually access to Jira later. I think you can also they have a free software on their website. But I just want to kind of point out how we use the software in terms of like how bug reports get moved around here. So you have different columns, and think of it. Think of these titles as like sticky notes, and when you click on it, it will have more information in each of these, and each of these sticky notes kind of moves along the line of the process, right? So for example, a bug report would be one of these sticky notes, right? And the title that you wrote out earlier as a QA, website, when I get to the website, I'm getting a 404 error. The title of that bug report would be here. And when developer or a QA opens one of these sticky notes, it will have steps how to reproduce it, right? And so the sticky note will move through the stages. So for example, when you report a bug, you might move your bug report into to do. And so a developer would be looking at this board, and whenever he's done with his previous work, he would see, okay, so what's next on my board? What do I need to work on next today? And he will look at the top of his to-do list and say, okay, well, it looks like Michael here reported a bug, and I'm just going to go ahead and grab this ticket, assign it to me as a developer, and start working on it. So he would open this up, he will assign his name to it, and he will move it over to in progress. And then while he's fixing this issue, he has this bug report in progress. Now, this allows him to keep track of what it is that he's working on right now at any given stage. And also at the same time, it gives everyone else on the team an idea of, where this bug is currently in. Like if it's still in to do and no one started working on it, or if it's in progress and one of the developers is already trying to fix it, right? This gives an idea to everyone on the team of the process, the progress, how long it takes for each of the bug reports to kind of go through. And then there are other tickets on here as well, depending on what the work needs to be done. And so once the developer fixes this bug, he will go ahead and move this over to code review. Code review, basically, we talked about a little bit earlier. This is where other developers look over the code that the developer wrote to make sure there's no issues or errors or mistakes. And then once they approve the report, they will go ahead and move this to done. So once it's in done, as a QA, oh, my bug has been fixed. So I'm going to go ahead and look at this column and, take a look at this bug and make sure, and I'm going to start verifying it, make sure that it's actually fixed. And so as a QA at my company, I would go ahead. I will go ahead and grab this ticket from done. I'm going to go ahead and try to verify it. And, if it's not fixed, I will take this ticket and I'll move it back to to-do. And the developer will know, oh, this ticket is back at my to-do. I need to take a look and see what I missed, why it's not working. And I'll go through the stages again. If it's fixed, I will move it over to the next stage to close, for example, right? And that's basically the process. It kind of keeps everyone on the same board, an understanding of where everyone is, who's working on what, what stage the software development is in. That's the life cycle. Okay, Jira is the only bug reporting software. No, actually, Jira, there's a few. Jira is probably the most popular one, but it's not the only one. There's definitely a lot of different ones out there. All teams do this. All teams do on the same bug or different. It depends how the teams are organized. It depends how many developers on your particular team. So it varies from company to company, from team to team. How are we to assign to someone, a developer in a bug report, but the dev assign themselves? So a bug report, when you create a bug report, and again, different companies have it different ways. I'm just kind of giving you guys an example of my company. It's most of the time it's the same. When I create a bug report, I will move it over to do. And if there's 4 or 5 developers in my team, whoever is frees up first, they don't have anything they work on next, they will look at this column and they will go ahead and grab the ticket that I submitted, and they will put their name on it saying that they will work on it next. So they assign themselves to it. Right, so that's also an option. Most of the time, that's the way it works. But when you report the ticket, you're always assigned to it because you're the reporter. So whoever is the reporter is automatically assigned. Whoever is working on a ticket assigned themselves to it. Can you explain code review again? A code review is basically what developers use to check each other's code. So a developer will write code and moves it over to code review. And another developer will read this code and make sure there is no mistakes in it, misspellings, or maybe some of the code that they wrote doesn't, break some other things in it. So they get to check each other's work and approve each other's work. So to be clear, we as QA close tickets, bug tickets. Yes, as a QA, you verify that the bug is fixed, and if you're satisfied with this fix and it's verified, you can go ahead and close the ticket. We're required to know any other reporting softwares. You are not required to know any other reporting softwares, but when you start working for a company, they might not necessarily use Jira, but they will show you the tool that they use, and they will most likely teach you how to use it. If you know Jira, you will 99% of the time will know how to use the other ones because they're all like very similar, almost the same. We open tickets to be cleared by developers. You open a bug ticket, developers fix it, you verify it, and if you're satisfied that it's the way it's supposed to be, you close it as a QA. All right. Can we get a free version on Jira? You will get an access to Jira later on in lessons because you're going to be writing bug reports, and you're going to see how the process works actually hands-on. So how do we know which developer we need to assign ticket in a bug report? You don't necessarily need to assign a developer. Developer might assign themselves. So you just need to open a ticket, a bug ticket, you move it over to, let's say, to do, and whichever developer is available, they will assign themselves, meaning that they will say, okay, I have free time to fix your bug. I'll assign it to myself, and they will go ahead and start fixing it. So you know which developer assigned themselves to it. All right, cool. Okay, a couple more things to cover here. Let's talk about types of Jira tickets. There are different types of Jira tickets. We have the epic. Epic is a large body of work which represents a big part of the project and can be broken down into a number of smaller parts, stories, and tasks. So a story is also called a user story. It's a short requirement or a feature which will be developed as a part of the epic. Tasks or subtasks. Task is basically a to-do action item, which can be part of any other issue type. And a bug is a problem which appears or prevents a function of a product. And we covered those a little bit ago. So to kind of understand, this concept, I just want to kind of give an example of, let's say we take, let's take Instagram as an example. And let's, for example, say Instagram decided to come up with a new feature, and their new feature is, they want to be able to have their users use video. Maybe let's imagine that this was before video was available on Instagram, and let's see how Instagram added video, this new feature. So this new feature adding, allowing users to record and post video is going to be an epic. This is one big epic. It's a large large body of work to be able to have customers, record video, post video, maybe send video to their friends, maybe like a video. So it's very complex, and to start building it out, it's gonna take some time. To go ahead and tackle this, it's much better to break it down into smaller stories, right? And as a story, for example, this is what it would look like. Let's say we want to be able to have a customer record a video. So that's one story. Customer is recording a story and posting it on their wall, right? That's story number one. Story number two, user is able to like somebody's video on their feed, right? A story number two, let's say a user is able to send that video they saw on their friend's wall to some other friend, like maybe a third friend. That's story number three. So those three different stories are part of an epic, because it's introducing video to Instagram. But you can do different things with this video. So that's why you want to break it down into different stories. So story number one, being able to record and post on your wall. And then you can break that story down into subtasks for developers to tackle. So subtask one would be, customer opens a camera and starts recording and hits send. Subtask number two is that the send of the video is showing up on their wall. So you can break those things into even smaller work, right? And the same thing with story two, right? Maybe being able to like a video on somebody's wall is basically go to somebody's wall, see a list of images, and one of them being a video, and then hitting the like, right? That's maybe a subtask number two. So breaking those things into smaller pieces allows developers to basically, code and have different, parts of code for it. So when you start to QA, you're going to be QAing a story. So the first story that you're QAing is being able to record a video and post on the wall. So whatever you find a bug, you're going to be writing a bug, in that particular, under that particular story, right? So that I went to, recorded a video, posted on the wall, and the video showed up blank. That's a bug. That's a bug report, just in simple terms, right? So the developer is able to, try to reproduce it, like they go ahead and record the video, post on the wall, and it was just black. There was no video showing up. That's a bug report onto the story one. Maybe a story two, you can write a bug report. You went to the user's wall, you saw the video, you hit the like. And the like showed up, but when you refreshed their story page, the like disappeared and it's not there anymore. That's also a bug, but that's also a bug under story number two. And that's basically how the process works. When all of the subtasks are finished, bugs are fixed, the stories are going to be closed out. All of the things are working. And as part of an epic, it's going to be released. So this epic, introducing video to Instagram is going to be released to all of the users, or maybe to a certain amount of users for Instagram users. And that's how an epic gets moved over to production. This was like a lot of information. Hope that makes sense. But essentially, that's the idea of software development lifecycle. This is how stories are being built out, how they're being moved from cycle to cycle and delivered to their customers. All right, let's see if I can answer some questions here. When I start testing a website or a project, do I have documentation that I have to follow? Yes, you should have documentation from your product manager. Does it mean QA also have access to a blueprint used to develop our software in order to know what to test for? Yes, you should be able to follow the product manager's documentation, which will have all of these stories listed, preferably in detail of how a user goes through different functions. And when you're QAing it, you're following these stories or writing your own test cases, or you wrote test cases based on this documentation, and you're making sure that it's actually doing what it's supposed to be doing. When you're posting a video, that it's actually showing up and it's not blank, or posting a video and there's sound and there's not just a video without sound, because that would be a bug, right? So things like that you're going to be tested for. How many on average bugs do QA get in 8-hour shift? That's a great question. It depends. Sometimes, I don't find any bugs. Sometimes I find 50 bugs. There may be a lot of bugs that developers missed. Maybe they were rushing. Maybe they were only building a certain part and they missed a whole page. It's like, it's different, but you don't have to worry about. You're not in a race to catch all the bugs. You want to be able to, but you will see bugs. Just want to make sure that you probably don't want to have most bugs found by your customers. But you will see bugs. So the project manager provides you with workflow to discover possible bugs. The project manager or product manager, I should say, will give you documentation and user stories, how the user is navigating through, whether that's a website or an application. It is your job to kind of discover those bugs. You want to verify what the developers build and what is written in the documentation, and you want to make sure those two match. If it doesn't match, then it's a bug. Then you report it and you say, okay, this doesn't match. Developers build this, but the documentation says this. You're going to write a bug report. There's some that there are bug reports that are written based on when there's mismatch between the documentation and what's built. There's also bug reports that are written when there's bugs that are, crashes or copy issues where misspelling, different colors, not from what is designed, or like, again, recording a video and video shows up without sound. That's an obvious bug. It might not be written in documentation, but it's understandable that if you have a video showing up on Instagram, you should have sound, right? Okay, let me see if we have any more. Oh, that's a new slide I haven't seen. Do we have to read code? No, I don't read code. I know a little bit, but definitely will help in the future if you want to ever move into like automation. Then in the future. Let's see. Oh, okay, cool. So we're at the end. Want to see if you guys have any questions. By the way, you're also welcome to ask me, about my job, what I do, any questions that may be about, being a QA. I'm happy to answer any of those questions. If you get like 10 bugs, are you going to create a different bug report for each of them or the same bug report? I mean, it depends. I mean, if the bugs are, if it's the same bug or it's, it's a similar bug, or sometimes I find a bug that if you fix it, it'll fix 2 or 3 other bugs. Sometimes I would just put it under the same, but essentially you probably want to report all of the bugs. The more bugs you report, the better. There's never enough. Sometimes one fix can fix 4 or 5 other bugs, and you'll just close them. You wouldn't need to worry about it. But don't be afraid to submit a lot of bugs. Based on your experience, how many times in a day do you meet with your team to discuss about specific tasks and stories? Different companies do it different ways. Some have a stand-up every day. Some have a stand-up once a week. Some have like back meetings on going over like backlogs and things like that. In my company, I meet with my team 2 times a week. And sometimes we have a meeting before a sprint and after a sprint, and you'll learn about those things actually in the next lesson with me, I think. And so it depends how the team is organized. What are the future plans for your career, QA lead automation or development? I want to probably QA automation. Not necessarily. I do a lot of things that are constantly like the same, and so I want to learn automation to like automate some of my workflows out of necessity. But I'm curious about automation. It's probably going to be my next step. What is the most challenging part of being manual QA? Writing test cases, for me anyway. I'm not a big fan of doing a lot of paperwork, but it comes into where you have to write test cases. However, test cases are very helpful at the end when you write out something and you forget how you were testing it. You know, you might get something back 3, 4, 5 months later, and you go back to your test cases, and there can be a lifesaver of trying to brainstorm and figure out what you were testing. And here you have something that you yourself wrote 5 months ago, and you just have to go step by step. So it could be very helpful as well, but it's annoying to write them. I'm not a big fan. Do you plan on moving to automation? What do you plan to do after manual QA? I'm probably going to stay with manual QA for quite some time. I like manual QA. To be honest, I'm not a big fan of writing code, and I like to look for I like the challenge of looking for like edge cases and testing different ways. It's very kind of a creative work for me, so I enjoy that more. What was your day like yesterday working as a manual QA? What do you do in your downtime while working? Yesterday, I got a new project that needs to be delivered next 3 weeks. So I have 3 weeks to manual QA a fairly large project. And so that was basically my day. I have a bunch of test cases that I follow through and make sure that the website matches the whatever's in the documentation from my product manager. And I go line by line and I verify that the copy is correct, the fields and forms are all correct. That's most of my work, is I make sure that everything matches the documentation. I don't really have downtime. Whenever there is slowdowns, I have to write test cases. So it's usually paperwork. Did you study for QA? I actually didn't really necessarily study for QA. Well, that's a lie. I did study for QA. I worked for Indeed, and I was a IT person there. I fixed laptops, and I came to my QA manager that was in the office, and I asked him, "Hey, I want to be a QA. Can you show me how to be a QA?" And the first thing he taught me is how to write bug reports. He said, "This is the most important thing you want to learn." I don't know if it's the most important thing, but it's definitely helped me a lot in my career for writing good bug reports. Make sure you learn how to write good bug reports. Trust me, it's going to save a lot of your time, and you're going to stand out compared to other QA. There's a lot of QAs they don't write good bug reports. What do you enjoy the most about a QA role in your organization? I enjoy looking for complex edge cases like bugs. You have an accent, yes. I was born in Russia, but I moved here many years ago. Do you use agile methodology? Yes, we use agile methodology. We use a Scrum system. Not a huge fan of the Scrum, but I like Kanban a little bit, but yes. Let's say you're going on vacation. Are you going to be able to work from another country? If your job is remote, my job is remote. I would be able to work from another country, but I try not to work on my vacation. I don't take my laptop with me. How long did it take to land your first QA job? 2 months, maybe. Yeah. Hey, have recent layoffs affected any QA testers? No, we're actually looking for QAs in my company. What other courses have you taken during your development in your current role? Everything I knew that I learned, I usually learn from my developers, and I try to learn to help find more complex bugs based on what they teach me. So they teach me different tools, and it kind of helps me in learning. Not necessarily, it might not be useful in other places, but particularly in my company, it's very useful. So, and I recommend that learn whatever you need based on what your company, is using and needs you to test. That's my idea, I guess. Little nervous when receive my first test. Don't want to have. I'm sure you'll be fine. That's not a complex. QA is not complex, guys. It's simple stuff. Keep it simple. Having the experience you do, what does growth look like, and how do I prepare myself for the future? I have different possibilities. I can go into automation. I can go into management role. I can go into leadership role. I can also be, as a QA, you can also move into product management. I've seen a lot of QAs moving into product management and also development. It's easy. As a manual QA, once you get into a company, there's different ways that you can go. Very easy to do that. Let's see. Do you ever bank common test cases as templates? Yes, I use a lot of templates. Very helpful. You can create a template and you can use that. Do you take cataracts while working full-time? I'm not sure I know what this is, sorry. How many interviews did you go through before landing a job? Like 5 or 6 maybe, but this was a long time ago, 4 years ago, so I don't know if it's different now. When you first started QA, what was your hourly rate? I don't know my hourly rate. It was I think it was 60,000. Again, this was like 6 years ago. I don't really know what the market is. To be honest, I haven't looked at the market. Not sure what's happening there now. But I think it's good. I hear good things. How hard are the interviews? I don't think they're difficult. My company sends homework, and you have to write some test cases, and you have to write some bug reports, and you have to be able to answer on what is the software development lifecycle. I know that for sure. So make sure you remember this. Is it better to start with a remote job or desk job? I don't know if it's, I mean, if you're in an office, you can probably be able to get more help from your coworkers, maybe learn quicker. So maybe have a, office job, it's more advantageous. Thanks for helping. Do you have a degree? Yes. Let's see. Hey, Mike, I'm for support team. All right. Wow, there is a lot of messages, guys. I don't know if I can get to all of them. I think let's do a couple more minutes here. Let's see, current inside group. In your experience, how long should you stay in your first job? How much is the lowest offer? I don't know about the lowest offer. How long you should stay at your job? I actually, my personal matter, if you don't like what you're doing, I mean, don't stay. If you're not learning anything, I probably wouldn't stay either. Have you any other teachers ever refer career students for positions? I would check with the, I don't think I have not, so I'm not sure if I can answer that. Are we done? We are actually done. So if you guys welcome to hop off. I don't have any more information on here. I think we're meeting in a couple more days. We're gonna go over some more things, but I want to thank you guys for coming, listening, and hope this stuff made sense and you learned something today. All right. Thank you. Thank you. All right. And this is all recorded, so you're going to get a copy of this. And yeah, I'll see you guys soon. Thank you again. And